Again? All right. Oofta. We're in the book of Exodus the last time I checked. I'd asked if anyone might argue with me about that, but Elwood's not here, so. I have my tick mark at chapter 9, verse 30. Does that sound right? Everybody got the same thing? Now we've got the promise of hail and thunder and fire, if you remember. Okay. Do y'all still have your charts that I handed out? I noticed I noticed this chart here and I realized we hadn't really been addressing this. We don't have to refer to it for everyone. Just know that you have it there if you want it. Okay. Now verse 31, now the flax and the barley were struck, for the barley was in the head and the flax was in bud. What does that mean, for the barley to be in the head and the flax was in bud? Yeah, in the head means it's ripe and almost ready to be harvested. In the bud means, well, we know what bud means. They're budding. It's not ready for harvest, but it's still, the stalk would be still mature enough, if that makes sense. But the wheat and the spelt were not struck, for they are late crops. Okay? So they were not struck. I have no idea what spelt is. Anybody know what spelt is? It's a grain. It's a grain?
Well, I believe so. But like for I've seen it on cereal boxes.
Really? Chapter 9, verse 32 now. Okay. No, I'm going to have to pay attention to that. I had no idea what that was. Okay. But the wheat and the spelt were not struck for their late crop. So basically it's telling us, where we did dig into this, we could even find what time of year this would have taken place based on what crops were in the field.
Does it mean that those fields that had those late crops in it, they were still hailed on?
They were still hailed on, but the crops weren't up to be damaged. Okay, so Moses, verse 33, went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to the Lord. Then the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured on the earth. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain, the hail, and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet more. And he hardened his heart, he only had one of them. He hardened his heart, he and his servants. So the heart of Pharaoh was hard, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord had spoken by Moses. Okay? So we're getting a pattern here now. I mean, we started off with Pharaoh simply saying no. And now we're getting a pattern where Pharaoh saying, okay, I cry uncle, I give, please make it stop. And when God makes it stop, Pharaoh goes, okay, now that it's stopped, why should I let you go? Right? Any questions in chapter 9? There are none, because we're so smart. 10:1. Then now the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine before him, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's son the mighty things I have done in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. And there God again shares his purpose in what he's doing. Number one, to show Pharaoh and his servants who he is, right? But also, he specifically says that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's son the mighty things I have done in Egypt. See, Moses is supposed to, down the road, share the things that God told him and the things that God did through him and for him. Does that make sense? So the purpose is so that his sons and his sons' sons or his grandsons would hear this, and what would that do? Why would God specifically tell Moses he's doing this? Because he wants him to tell his children and his grandchildren all about it. So they don't forget. Remember, they didn't have the Bible. I mean, you know what I'm saying? What we're reading now, they didn't have that. And so everything was passed down orally, right? You know, I love to tell stories, family stories, okay? Most of them I can't do in church, but no, I'm kidding. I love to tell family stories because there's a history there that if the stories don't get told, get completely lost, right? My dad was a storyteller. I like telling my dad's stories all the time because he was a storyteller. All the family history, because my dad was the youngest, I'm the youngest son of a youngest son, which meant my dad's family were old because he was the youngest and then I was the youngest. My cousins on my dad's side were old, you know. I mean, it was just, my dad's son. I wouldn't know anything about my dad's family or his childhood if he had not have told so many stories, you know. But that's what we're supposed to do. That, you know, the point of this is he's telling Moses, this is why I'm doing this, so you do that. Well, we're supposed to do that as well. You know, we're supposed to talk about what God has done in our lives, and not just in church, right? The oral history of Christianity, I think, is more powerful in some regards than Scripture itself. Because what I'm saying is sometimes the oral history, our stories, have more impact on the people around us initially than the Scriptures do. Because it's that oral history, is that testimony, if you will, that piques their interest and draws them into wanting to find out more. Now, am I saying it certainly is more powerful than Scripture? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that it is extremely important, initially at least, in drawing people in, drawing the seekers or those around us into finding out more about that God that we serve, that makes us so full of joy or whatever our story or our testimony involves. Fair enough? So Moses, verse 3, so Moses and Aaron came into Pharaoh and said to him, thus says the Lord God of Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go that they may serve me. Or else if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory, and they shall cover the face of the earth, so that no one will be able to see the earth, and they shall eat the residue of what is left, which remains to you from the hail, and they shall eat every tree which grows up for you out of the field. They shall fill your houses, the houses of your servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, which neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were on the earth to this day. And he turned and went out from Pharaoh. All right, a couple things here. Go back, locusts. I remember years ago, many years ago, I did it wasn't in college, it had to have been in high school. I did a paper on the Dust Bowl days. But I didn't do it on the Dust Bowl, I did it on the locusts. And because back then, the locust, I think that's part of what caused the Dust Bowl, is the locust. But anyways, the whole point is, I never understood how much damage locusts can do. But there are stories out there of locust swarms landing on a farm, and they eat everything, right down to eating the wooden handles off of rakes. You know, they would eat everything. It's amazing how damaging they were. And there are still locusts in the world today. They haven't been eradicated. They've just been controlled in most of the first world nations. I remember reading, it's probably about 2 years ago, they had a massive swarm in Africa that apparently the satellites could pick up. It was so big. So locusts still exist. So they would have understood what the locust was. This wasn't something new. But what God is saying is I'm going to send a swarm so larger than you haven't seen ever before. Okay? And that's a big thing about these plagues that God sends is it isn't just that he has the authority over nature and he could send a swarm of locusts. It's when God sends a swarm of locusts, he sends the swarm of locusts. You know, the worst you've ever seen. It isn't just a simple. Yeah, there you go. So.
And did you notice that God says, tomorrow I'll send it? So he gave him, could be up to 24 hours to change his heart.
Yeah, and in reality, and he did that. He did that. He's getting, I don't want to say more and more, but he's giving Pharaoh an out. Even though God says, I've hardened his heart, that doesn't remove the Pharaoh's free will. Pharaoh would never change his heart, and God knew that. Does that make sense? So, but also when you get to the end, well, first of all, he's promising to send it only to the houses of the Egyptians. Okay? Again, we saw this before too, right? Where the Israelites were not going to be touched by the plague. And so then he sent it out. But at the end of Moses or Aaron's speech, we didn't get a response from Pharaoh. It ends with, and he turned and went out from Pharaoh. So he laid it out, and then they left. Okay? Verse 7, then Pharaoh's servants said to him, how long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet know that Egypt is destroyed? Okay. So now his counselors, okay, his servants, his counselors, his advisors are telling him, how long are you going to put up with this? Why don't you just let them go serve their God?
It just looks like it's messing up at times, but it's not where you can't see it.
Okay.
So,
Maybe I need to stand still. Thank you. Okay, it's fine. All right, so this is the first time we have it recorded that Pharaoh's advisors or his servants are starting to counsel him to let them go. But at this point, it's still an understanding of just going out, 3 days walk, right? So they can worship their God and then come back. But they added at the end a very telling thing. Do you not yet know that Egypt is destroyed? I mean, think about all the plagues we've had thus far. And I've got the list in front of me. You got the Nile turning to blood. You got the frogs. You got the lice. You got the flies. You got the cattle disease. You got the boils. You got the hail and fire. And then you got the promise of locusts. How much left? How much is left? So you got that the livestock is, most of them probably are dead because not. I would venture a guess, it doesn't say specifically how many, but some brought their animals in, but I would venture a guess most of them did not, right? You got the crops destroyed because of the hail, and then you got the promise of the locusts coming to clean up anything that's left. Egypt is almost completely in shambles at this point, economically, right? So Moses and Aaron were brought again to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go, serve the Lord with your God. Who are the ones that are going?" Okay, so now he wants details. Because go serve your Lord, your God. Who's going? And Moses said, "We will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds we will go, for we must hold a feast to the Lord." Okay, so that's pretty much everybody. And everything. They're taking all their livestock too. Okay? Now we're in Exodus chapter 10, now in verse 10. Then he said to them, "The Lord had better be with you when I let you and your little ones go. Beware, for evil is ahead of you." What does he mean by that? Anyone?
If they don't come back, they're going to be in trouble.
The Lord had better be with you when I let you go and your little one, let you and your little ones go. Beware, for evil is ahead of you. Okay? Then he says, I'm going to continue, then we're going to go back to it. "Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desired." Okay? When he says evil is ahead of you, what I think he's trying to acknowledge or to state there is an understanding that he doesn't have a good feeling about this. Now, why is the Pharaoh not letting them go out and worship in the first place? Other than the fact that the Lord hardened his heart, why isn't the Pharaoh letting them go out and worship? Because he's afraid they're not going to come back. Does that make sense?
That's why he wanted to know who all was going.
That's why he wanted to know who all is going.
If they didn't take the women and left them there.
Well, if they didn't take the women, they probably wouldn't come back, but no. But no, you're right. He was afraid they wouldn't come back. So to say that evil is ahead of you, I think that is a not so veiled threat. That if you don't come back, the way I think the verbiage he's using, I think Moses would have understood that, of him saying, "Go, but if you don't come back, you're going to have problems," right? And that you're going to have problems, is stating it very lightly. But excuse me. And he says, "Not so." By saying "not so," what he's saying is be it not so. Make sure you come back. And then he says, "Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desired." And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. Okay? Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land, all the hail is left." Okay, now, you see a difference here, or is there something that strikes you as odd?
Yeah, he's already said that they can leave.
He said go, right? He said go, but God is saying send the locusts anyways. Why?
Because he knows Pharaoh's heart.
Because God knows Pharaoh isn't going to let them go, right? There's a progression to all these plagues in God's messages and Pharaoh's responses, and then God's response to Pharaoh's response. That makes sense? There's a progression. It starts with everything gets worse. And God is kind of making a statement, okay? And God is not breaking the deal, right? In other words, if you look at this, if you read this with a lack of understanding of the nature of God, I could understand you'd be tempted to say, well, God broke his word because he said, let my people go or I will send locusts, right? And Pharaoh said, fine, and go. Well, God sent the locusts anyways. Well, that's not that's a broken deal. Except knowing the nature of God, first off, he will never break a deal, right? He always keeps his word. And secondly, being omniscient and omnipresent, God knows Pharaoh's heart, and he knows Pharaoh isn't going to let them go. So it's not a broken deal because the reality is, even if the words weren't said out loud yet, Pharaoh has already broken the deal in his heart. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand. I'm in verse 12. Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land and all that the hail has left. So Moses stretched out his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. Excuse me. And the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt and rested on all the territory of Egypt. They were very severe. Previously there had been no such locusts as they, nor shall there be such after them, for they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they ate every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. So there remained nothing green on the trees or on the plants of the field throughout all the land of Egypt. That's pretty devastating, right?
Yeah, because what were they exactly eating during this time?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot left to eat at this point, is there? Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste and said, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now, therefore, please forgive my sin only this once, and entreat the Lord your God that he may take away from me this death only. Okay? We understand he's calling it this death. He's recognizing that imagine the death and the famine and the disease it's going to cause, having lost virtually, I don't say all, but the vast majority of your livestock, virtually all of your crops in the field. Okay? Imagine what kind of death that's going to bring with it. Okay? So he went out from the Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord turned a very strong west wind, which took the locusts away and blew them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the territory of Egypt. That is one heck of a wind. Kind of, yeah. So Elwood brought up a couple times now something that I really had not paused to think about. But the miracle isn't just in the plagues. The miracle also is in the removal of the plagues, right? So it's a double miracle for each one. I mean, it's a miracle God caused the wind to blow in the locusts just like he promised they would, but it's just as powerful a miracle for God to get rid of the locusts, just like he promised he would, okay? But the Lord, verse 20, hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go. Okay? Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven so that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness which may even be felt. Now, anything different in this one? He didn't go to Pharaoh. He just jumped straight to the plague or the curse, right? So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven. There was a thick darkness on the land for 3 days. It says darkness which may even be felt. What do you think about that? What does it mean, darkness that can be felt? an evil darkness, a presence, a supernatural darkness. If you've ever been in a position of complete darkness, especially with any kind of anxiety or uncertainty, you can feel it. You can it's so hard to, at least for me, to explain if you've never felt it. But if you've felt it, you know exactly what it means, right? And if anybody else can explain it better than I can, by all means. But I mean, that is some complete darkness. Okay, so he stretched it out, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. Okay, and think of it this way. We always talk about it blotting out the sun, but it was more than that. For complete darkness for 3 days, darkness so dark you can feel it. There is no sun, and if there is no sun, there obviously is no moon, right? Because the moon is not a source of light. It just reflects the light of the sun. And no stars. Complete darkness. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And I'm going to pause there. The way I read this, the Egyptians couldn't even light a fire. Right? Because only the Israelites, the Hebrews, had light in their homes. You know, they had their oil lamps burning, so they had light in their homes. But the Egyptians, they couldn't even see one another. Imagine them walking into one another, you know. And there was no visit to Pharaoh, which means what? Pharaoh has no idea how long this is going to last yet, does he? Then Pharaoh called to Moses and said, "Go, serve your Lord. Only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Let your little ones also go with you." All right? So now he's saying, it almost sounds like his heart is changing a little bit, almost. He's saying, you can go, but leave your flocks behind. Why your flocks? It's kind of like collateral. It's surety that they'd come back, right? But Moses says, "You must also give us sacrifices and burnt offerings that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock also shall go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind. For we must take some of them to serve the Lord our God. And even we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive there." So he's telling Pharaoh, we can't go without our livestock because we don't know what we're going to have to sacrifice to worship our God till we get there. Okay? But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, "Get away from me. Take heed to yourself and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die." Okay, in the back of my brain, I'm thinking, what took him so long? You know, remember we talked about that? And that's, again, that is divine intervention. Because if I was Pharaoh and I was, working on my own here, I wouldn't take more than twice before Moses come before me. Excuse me. And promise something and it happened. And certainly if it took more than twice after the lice, I'd be done. I don't ever want to see that guy again. Stop him at the gate. I don't want to see him again. But yet, Pharaoh still would have an audience with him. And I believe that's solely a divine intervention. Okay? But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let him go. Then Pharaoh said, "Get away from me," verse 28. "Take heed to yourself and see my face no more, for in the day you see my face, you shall die." So Moses said, "You have spoken well. I will never see your face again." Questions on chapter 10. We got through more than an entire chapter today, which is, I think, a personal best. You know? Do you have a pencil by any chance? I don't like writing in my Bible in a pen, but I lost my pencil at some point. But we'll stop there. I'll put my tick mark at the beginning of chapter 11. We'll pick that up. I think next week is the last Sunday of the month, so we'll pick it up in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. And we will close in prayer. Any questions or comments before we close in prayer? You guys are so smart. We go through this so fast.
I gotta say, a sparrow is one slow learner.
One slow learner. Amen.
Now he's just a typical man.
Typical man. So, okay, if